This is a flipped lesson of the rhetorical analysis of persuasive techniques in Patrick Henry's speech to the Virginia Convention. This is for AP Language and Composition students for American Literature. Students should have already read through this speech and attempted to answer the questions in this document. In this lesson, we're going to go through the first paragraph and answer the questions in order so that students can see how they're being answered. Students can then compare their answers to the answers that they themselves came up with. Okay. First, what is Patrick Henry's overall position and or call to action? Who's his audience? And what is the occasion of the speech? The occasion is Speech to the Virginia Convention on March 23rd, 1775. His audience is the other members of the Virginia Convention. And his purpose, or his call to action, is to get them to declare war against the king. Okay. Determine Patrick Henry's tone in this speech. His tone is urgent, his tone is pleading, and it's a bit inflammatory, as we can see. Question number 1 says, why do you think Henry begins his speech with the statement, Mr. President, no man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as abilities of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights. So why do you think he begins his speech with that statement? Well, first off, Henry is defending his position as a patriot. He's saying the men here who have talked about, compromising with the king, they are patriots, but so am I. And so he talks about his patriotism as a very, very worthy thing. The second part, where he says we often see the same subject in different lights, he's saying he has respect for people who see things differently, and he expects the same respect from them. Number 2, Henry says that different men often see the same subject in different lights. Okay? What does the word light mean here, and why do you think he uses it? Okay, so the word light here is actually talking about the different ways in which people see things. But he uses the word light because light has a different connotation, as in shine a light on something, or as in the light of illumination or truth. And so he uses the word light to show that he is indeed thinking about illumination and intellectual illumination in respect to this idea of fighting. Number 3, Henry states his view in saying that I consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery. First, what does he mean by it? Okay, and so I consider it as nothing less. His it is their need to fight for freedom. He is the one that is saying we have to fight. Okay, and he says it's a question of freedom or slavery. Okay, fighting means they can be free. Not fighting means they're going to be slaves. Okay, so the second part of the question asks, what logical fallacy does he use here in trying to be persuasive? And then what appeal does that create? Well, the fallacy is the either-or fallacy. Okay, that there are only 2 ways of looking at the question. It's either this or this, that there's no in between. Okay, so he uses an either-or fallacy. Okay, and he's trying to appeal to pathos. Okay, the idea that slavery would create fear and anger for the colonists. And so he has an appeal to pathos, or emotions. Okay. Number 4, what appeal does he create when he says, it is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we hold to God and our country. What does truth mean to Henry? Okay. Well, first off, we want to see what appeal does he create, okay, to arrive at truth. Well, truth is an appeal to this idea of responsibility which we hold to God and our country. That's an appeal to authority, okay, or an appeal to ethos. Okay, he appeals to the authority of God, and he also appeals to his authority as a Christian. Okay, and then this truth. What does truth mean? He says he's fighting for God's truth. Okay? And so he gives that further appeal to authority by saying this is God's truth. It's not just our truth, but it's God's truth that we fight for. Okay? And so he says that they're fighting for their freedom because that's what God holds to be true. Number 5. What is the appeal created by juxtaposing God as the majesty of heaven with earthly kings? Okay, first off, this word juxtapose. Juxtapose means to set up as opposites. Okay, so you have God as the king of heaven versus the earthly kings. And that king they're talking about is King George III. Okay, so what is the effect of his using the word majesty for God and king for King George III? Okay, take a look at those two. Majesty, capitalized. King, small. Okay, he creates an appeal to authority, which is ethos. Okay, and he places God above King George III. Okay, since he has previously talked about how it is God's truth that they fight, everyone who is saying that, oh, we can't fight the king, he's saying, no. God's truth is more important. God is above. God's authority is more than the king's. And therefore, it's okay to fight the king because we're fighting for something greater than that. Okay? So he's implying that God has a greatness in character and a greatness in authority that is over any earthly king. And that gives them the right to fight the king.